Please take a deep breath and close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the exact sound of a heavy, metal coin dropping into a public telephone booth. Or perhaps recall the sharp, crisp scent of wet wool and melting snow when you stepped into a warm hallway after hours of playing outside. Welcome back, my old friend. Today, we are going to take a very special journey together. We are travelling back to a time when the world was vast, when doors were left unlocked, and when the rules of life were dictated by common sense and mutual trust, rather than a thick book of laws. We are going down memory lane to look at 20 everyday things that were absolutely normal in 1970s Russia. These are the sweet, careless rituals of our youth that today, in our modern, heavily regulated world, are considered completely illegal, dangerous, or strictly forbidden. And wait until you hear the very last item on our list. It is a memory of absolute, pure freedom that will surely bring a warm tear to your eye. But before we dive into these forgotten rituals, let us remember how different the very fabric of time felt back then. In the 1970s, time moved at a completely different pace. It was slower, richer, and far more deliberate. There was no instant gratification, no rushing to check a glowing screen in your pocket. We knew how to wait, and more importantly, we knew how to talk to one another while we waited. There is a common myth today that because we lacked modern technology, our lives were somehow emotionally poorer or more isolated. The truth is the exact opposite. Our lives were infinitely richer in genuine human connection. The entire neighborhood raised the children. We knew the names of the people living on every floor of our apartment building. We shared our joys, our sorrows, and our meager resources without a second thought. The things we did back then, the things that are outlawed today, were only possible because of an invisible, unbreakable web of societal trust. We were not reckless. We were simply connected to each other in a way that modern laws cannot comprehend. Let us begin with a memory that still brings the sweet taste of pear syrup to my tongue. Do you remember the heavy metal soda vending machines that stood proudly on almost every busy street corner? Let us travel back to a hot summer afternoon in 1975. You are walking down a sunlit avenue, the asphalt warm and soft beneath your leather sandals. You hear the distinct, rhythmic clunk of the heavy coin dropping into the slot. 3 kopecks would buy you sparkling water with thick, sweet syrup, and just 1 kopeck got you plain, sparkling water. But the most incredible part, something that would send modern health inspectors into an absolute panic today, was the single, communal glass tumbler resting on a small metal tray. Everyone drank from the exact same glass. There were no disposable plastic cups, no sterile packaging. You would simply press the glass upside down onto the rinser. A weak spray of cool water would wash the rim for 3 seconds, and then you would fill it up. People of all ages, from factory workers in grease-stained overalls to elegant ladies in bright summer dresses, shared that one glass. No one worried about germs or viruses. We trusted each other implicitly. Today, sharing a glass with thousands of strangers on a city street violates countless sanitary regulations. It would be shut down in a heartbeat. But back then, it was the ultimate taste of a carefree childhood. Now, let us turn our memories to the local grocery store. Imagine a small boy, barely 8 years old, walking confidently up to the wooden counter. The air smells of fresh bread, sawdust scattered on the floor, and the metallic tang of the heavy wooden abacus the cashier is rapidly clicking. The boy hands over a crumpled, handwritten note from his father, along with a few ruble notes. The cashier reads the note, nods, and calmly hands the child a bottle of vodka and a pack of strong, unfiltered cigarettes. Can you imagine the absolute uproar this would cause today? In our modern era, with strict age verification laws and child protection services, a cashier doing this would be arrested on the spot and the parents would face severe legal trouble. But in the 1970s, this was perfectly normal. The cashier knew the boy, knew his father, and knew the family lived just 2 buildings down. It was a chore, no different than buying a loaf of rye bread or a carton of milk. It was an era where the village mentality survived even in the cities, where adults trusted other adults, and children were just miniature members of the community, helping out with the daily errands. And speaking of childhood, let us remember how mothers went shopping in the winter. Picture a freezing January morning. The snow is piled high, crunching loudly under thick felt boots. A young mother approaches the bakery to buy some fresh, hot bread. She has her baby bundled up tightly in thick woolen blankets, sleeping peacefully in a heavy, high-wheeled pram. The bakery is crowded and warm inside, so what does she do? She simply leaves the pram, with her precious infant sleeping inside, right outside on the snowy pavement. She walks into the store, stands in line for 20 minutes, buys her bread and comes back out. During all that time, the baby was completely alone on a busy city street. Today, leaving an infant unattended in public is a serious crime. The police would be called immediately, and headlines would scream about child endangerment. But back then, no one even batted an eye. In fact, if the baby started to cry, a passing stranger would likely stop and gently rock the pram until the mother returned. The collective watchful eye of the community was the only security camera we ever needed. The trust we had in our fellow citizens was absolute and unwavering. Let us transition from the snowy streets to the muddy courtyards of early spring. Do you remember what the older boys did for fun behind the garages? They would hunt down old, broken car batteries and drag them into the yard. With a heavy rock, they would smash the plastic casing open to extract the dark, heavy sheets of lead inside. Then they would build a small bonfire right there on the grass. Using an old tin can as a crucible, they melted that highly toxic lead over the open flames. The black smoke would rise into the air, smelling of burning plastic and strange chemicals. Once the metal was molten, they would pour it into molds pressed into the damp earth, creating homemade soldiers, knuckles, or fishing weights. Today, breaking open batteries and melting lead in a residential area violates severe environmental protection laws, hazardous waste regulations, and child safety laws. A hazardous materials team would likely be dispatched to clean up the soil. But for the boys of the 1970s, this was just an afternoon craft project. It was a tactile, gritty way of learning how the world worked, feeling the incredible weight of the cooled metal resting in the palm of your dirty hand. And how did we travel to the countryside during those warm months? Think back to the collective farm harvests or the trips to the pioneer camps. A massive, green, open-backed dump truck would pull up. The wooden sideboards would be lowered, and 20 people, children and adults alike, would scramble up into the dusty metal bed. We would sit on wooden benches, or sometimes just on piles of hay or old blankets. The engine would roar, smelling strongly of diesel, and off we went down bumpy dirt roads. The wind whipped through our hair, the sun beat down on our faces, and we sang songs at the top of our lungs while bouncing around with every pothole. There were no seatbelts, no rollover protection, no padded seats. Today, transporting human beings in the open cargo bed of a commercial truck is strictly illegal and heavily fined by the traffic police for obvious safety reasons. But back then, it was the greatest adventure. The sheer physical thrill of holding onto the wooden sides, feeling the raw mechanical power of the truck, and watching the endless fields roll by is a sensation that modern, climate-controlled, safety-belted cars simply cannot replicate. Let us stay in the autumn season for a moment. Close your eyes and recall the specific melancholy scent of October. The yard keepers, dressed in heavy aprons, would sweep the golden and brown fallen leaves into massive piles using long brooms made of birch twigs. And then, right in the middle of the crowded residential courtyard, surrounded by 5-story apartment buildings, they would strike a match and set the piles on fire. The thick, sweet, and slightly acrid smoke would slowly rise, filling the entire neighborhood. It seeped into our woolen coats and lingered in our hair. Children would grab sticks and poke the embers, sometimes throwing raw potatoes into the ashes to bake them. Today, burning organic waste within city limits is totally illegal due to Clean Air Acts, environmental regulations, and fire safety codes. The smoke is considered toxic smog. But to us, that scent was the very essence of autumn. It was the smell of the changing seasons, a communal signal that winter was coming, and a cozy ritual that gathered neighbors around a glowing, crackling pile of leaves in the fading evening light. Do you remember the absolute frenzy of the school's scrap metal and waste paper drives? The entire school would be divided into teams, and we were sent out into the city like little hunters. But we didn't just ask politely at front doors. We ventured deep into abandoned factories, climbed over rusty wire fences into dangerous industrial zones, and descended into dark, flooded basements of condemned buildings. We would drag out heavy, jagged, rusty iron pipes, abandoned radiators, and massive gears. We dragged them for miles through the streets with our bare hands, without gloves, hard hats, or any adult supervision whatsoever. We were 9 or 10 years old, navigating hazardous industrial waste sites to win a cardboard certificate at the school assembly. Today, this is a nightmare of trespassing laws, child labour violations, and immense liability. If a school sent children to scavenge in abandoned factories today, the principal would be sent to prison. But for us, it felt like an incredibly important mission. We felt useful, independent, and fiercely proud of the rusty treasures we managed to haul back to the schoolyard. Let us talk about the things we kept in our medicine cabinets. Every home had a small glass vial filled with tiny, glittering, deep purple crystals. It was potassium permanganate, or as we called it, margantsovka. You could walk into any pharmacy and buy huge quantities of it for just a few kopecks, no questions asked. Mothers used it for absolutely everything. They dissolved a few crystals in warm water to wash out a scraped knee, to bathe a newborn baby, or to drink if you had an upset stomach. We all remember that faint metallic taste and how it stained our fingers and fingernails a deep, rusty brown for weeks. Today, you cannot just walk in and buy those jars of crystals. It is strictly controlled and heavily regulated by anti-terrorism and drug enforcement laws, because those simple purple crystals can be used to manufacture explosives and illicit substances. What was once the most innocent, universal household remedy, a staple of every grandmother's care routine, is now treated as a dangerous chemical precursor. The innocence of that small glass vial has been entirely lost to the complexities of the modern world. And speaking of health, let us recall the astonishing freedom of smokers in that era. Picture yourself boarding a passenger aeroplane for a long flight across the country. You walk down the narrow aisle, find your fabric seat, and as soon as the plane reaches cruising altitude, the illuminated no smoking sign turns off with a soft ding. Instantly, half the passengers pull out matches and light up their strong, unfiltered cigarettes. The cabin rapidly fills with a thick, blue haze of tobacco smoke, mixing strangely with the smell of the aluminium trays of aeroplane food. It wasn't just aeroplanes. People smoked in train compartments, in the corridors of hospitals, in university lecture halls, and right at their desks in government offices. Heavy, thick glass ashtrays were a standard piece of furniture absolutely everywhere. Today, smoking in enclosed public spaces, especially on aeroplanes and in hospitals, is heavily penalized by strict clean air laws and carries massive fines. The idea of sitting in a sealed metal tube at 30,000 feet while 50 people puff on heavy tobacco seems absolutely absurd now, but back then, it was just the normal background atmosphere of adult life. Let us move into the warm, cozy kitchen of a 1970s apartment. The gas stove is hissing, and a large pot of soup is bubbling away. To prevent the table from burning, or to diffuse the heat under a delicate frying pan, our mothers and grandmothers used thick, white, fibrous boards. It was raw asbestos. People bought it in hardware stores, brought it home, and cut it into squares with regular kitchen scissors. The fine white dust would fall onto the countertops, and we would simply wipe it away with a damp cloth. Fathers used it to insulate pipes in the bathroom, handling it with their bare hands. Today, asbestos is known as one of the most dangerous, cancer-causing materials on the planet. Its sale, use, and handling are strictly banned, and removing it from old buildings requires men in full hazmat suits and respirators. But in our childhood kitchens, that white fibrous board was seen as a miracle material, a handy, fireproof tool that kept the linoleum safe from hot pots. We lived intimately with things that modern science now classifies as deadly hazards, completely unaware and entirely unafraid. Let us look out from that kitchen onto the apartment balcony. In many cities, especially on the ground floors or in the sprawling suburbs, people treated their concrete balconies like extensions of a village farm. It was incredibly common to wake up on the 5th floor of a massive grey concrete apartment block to the sound of a rooster crowing. People built wooden coops and raised live chickens, rabbits, and sometimes even small pigs right there on their balconies. You could smell the distinct odour of hay and animal feed mixing with the city exhaust. Come winter, those balconies became open-air freezers where sides of beef or pork hung suspended from the ceiling on heavy iron hooks. Today, strict urban zoning laws, sanitary regulations, and animal cruelty ordinances completely forbid raising livestock in high-rise apartment buildings. Your neighbours would call the health department immediately. But for a generation that had survived harder times, keeping a few chickens on the balcony was simply a practical, comforting connection to their rural roots. A way to ensure there was always fresh food on the table, regardless of what the stores had in stock. Now, imagine the rhythmic clatter of heavy steel wheels on the rails. The train journey was a deeply romantic part of our culture. But what is shocking today is how children travelled. It was perfectly normal to put a 7 or 8-year-old child on a long-distance train, completely alone, to travel for 2 or 3 days to visit their grandparents in another republic. The parents would bring the child to the platform, hand their ticket to the female conductor, say a quick goodbye, and wave as the train pulled away. The conductor, usually a stern but warm-hearted woman, would keep an eye on the child. The strangers in the compartment would share their roasted chicken, hard-boiled eggs, and tea served in those beautiful glass glasses with metal holders. The entire carriage took care of the child. Today, unaccompanied minor laws, child endangerment statutes, and modern security protocols make it completely illegal and impossible to send a young child alone on a cross-country train without massive bureaucracy and paid escorts. The absolute trust that strangers would protect and feed your child in a locked moving train is a beautiful, vanished reality. When the relentless heat of July hit the city, we sought water wherever we could find it. We didn't wait for pristine, chlorinated swimming pools. We went down to the city rivers, the industrial canals, and the deep, dark, flooded quarries on the edge of town. There were massive factories nearby, puffing smoke into the sky, and who knows what was draining into that water. But we didn't care. We tied thick ropes to the branches of ancient weeping willow trees and swung out over the murky green water, plunging in with a massive splash. We swam until our lips turned blue, drying off on the hot, concrete embankments. Today, those waters are strictly fenced off, marked with stark red signs forbidding swimming due to toxic chemical runoff and heavy metal pollution. Police patrols would pull you out and fine you instantly. But back then, the river was our sanctuary. We didn't know about water quality indexes or bacterial counts. We only knew the joy of the cool water washing away the dust of the city and the endless summer days spent laughing on the muddy banks with our friends. Let us talk about the games we played in the dirt. Every boy had a folding pocket knife, and he brought it to school every single day. During recess, we would gather in a circle on a patch of bare earth to play a game called knives. The rules were incredibly intricate. You had to flip the knife into the dirt from your palm, the back of your hand, your elbow, your chin, and even your forehead. If the blade stuck firmly in the ground, you claimed that piece of territory. The heavy click of the folding blade and the thud of the steel hitting the earth were the sounds of our playground. Today, bringing a knife of any size onto school grounds is a severe criminal offence. Modern zero-tolerance weapons policies would result in immediate expulsion, police involvement, and a permanent record for the child. A pocket knife is now viewed strictly as a deadly weapon, but to us it was merely a toy, a tool for whittling sticks, and the central piece of a beloved game of skill. We learned responsibility and coordination, and no one ever even thought of using it to harm another person. Do you remember the strange architecture that dominated the spaces between our apartment buildings? I'm talking about the metal garages, the rusty iron shells we called seashells. They popped up everywhere, completely unauthorized. A man would buy a car and then simply claim a piece of the communal lawn or playground. He would weld together heavy sheets of corrugated iron, slap a massive, heavy padlock on the front, and call it his own. On weekends, these illegal garage settlements became men's clubs. The heavy doors were thrown open, hoods were popped, and the air smelled of gasoline, cheap tobacco, and grease. Men shared tools, advice, and stories. Today, modern urban planning and strict property laws have seen all these unregistered structures forcibly demolished by city bulldozers. You cannot simply build a metal shack on public land to park your car. But for decades, these rusty metal villages were the beating heart of male socializing. A chaotic but deeply organized community born out of a desperate need to protect their precious, hard-earned vehicles. Let us travel out onto the long, dusty highways connecting the towns. Hitchhiking was not just for desperate travelers. It was a completely normal mode of transport for everyone, including children. If you missed the rural bus, you simply walked to the edge of the asphalt and raised your hand. Within minutes, a heavy truck or a passing larder would pull over. The driver, usually a tired man with rough hands, would open the door and a child could hop in for a ride to the next village. The driver would share his thermos of tea, tell stories about the road, and drop you exactly where you needed to go, all for free. Today, the concept of stranger danger and strict liability laws have eradicated this practice. Putting a child in a stranger's car on a highway is unthinkable, a terrifying prospect for any modern parent. But back then, the road was a community. A driver stopping to help someone walking in the heat was a basic human duty, a reflection of the deep solidarity that connected people across the vast expanses of the country. And how did those drivers maintain their cars? If you needed to change your oil, you didn't go to a certified eco-friendly mechanic. You drove your car right up onto the sidewalk, placed a rusty bucket underneath, and unbolted the oil pan. And if you didn't have a bucket, people would casually drain thick, black, toxic motor oil directly into the street storm drains, watching it wash away with the next rain. Or they would drive their cars down to the picturesque riverbank, take out a rag and a bucket of soapy water, and wash the dirt and grease right into the river where people were swimming just a mile downstream. Today, environmental protection agencies strictly monitor the disposal of automotive fluids. Pouring motor oil into a storm drain carries massive fines and potential jail time for ecological damage. But in our era, environmental awareness simply did not exist on an everyday level. The world seemed so incredibly huge and resilient that no one believed a little oil could possibly hurt it. It was a time of blissful yet destructive ignorance. Let us return to the magic of winter. Do you remember the sheer thrill of finding the perfect, towering, icy hill to sled down? The most popular hills were often entirely unregulated, unapproved, and incredibly dangerous. Sometimes they were steep embankments that ended right at the edge of a busy, ploughed road. We didn't have expensive plastic sleds. We used pieces of thick cardboard, old stolen cafeteria trays, or heavy, rigid metal sleds that weighed a ton. We would throw ourselves head first down the ice, gaining terrifying speed, crashing into each other, and tumbling into the snowbanks. We came home hours later, our mittens frozen solid, our knees bruised, completely exhausted, and incredibly happy. Today, city authorities immediately spread salt or sand over such hills to prevent lawsuits. Safety barriers are erected, and unauthorized sliding areas are strictly prohibited due to liability and safety codes. We have traded the raw, bruised thrill of reckless winter freedom for padded safety and regulated recreation. Finally, let us walk quietly into the deep, waking birch forests of early spring. The snow is melting, revealing the dark, wet earth. It was a beloved ritual to go deep into the woods, take a thick iron nail and a hammer, and drive a hole straight into the white bark of an ancient birch tree. We would insert a small metal groove, hang a large glass jar underneath, and leave it there overnight. The next morning, the jar would be full of clear, sweet, cold birch sap. We drank the lifeblood of the forest directly from the tree. We also gathered baskets of mushrooms and wild berries, roaming freely through any forest we pleased. Today, foraging in many protected natural zones, and especially damaging trees to extract sap on public land, is tightly regulated by forestry laws and conservation codes. You need permits, and driving nails into trees is considered vandalism. But for us, it was a deeply spiritual connection to the land. The forest was our larder, our playground, and our provider. We took what we needed, we respected the woods, and we felt an unbroken bond with the nature that surrounded us. As we open our eyes and return to the present day, we must ask ourselves, what is it that we truly miss? It is not the toxic asbestos, nor the dangerous car rides, nor the lack of safety protocols. What we long for is the invisible thread that held all of these memories together. We miss the profound, unquestioning trust we had in our neighbours. We miss the slow, deliberate pace of a world that was not yet terrified of itself. We miss a time when common sense ruled over rigid legislation, and when human connection was the most powerful law of the land. We have gained immense safety, cleanliness, and convenience in our modern era, but we have undeniably lost the wild, raw, beautiful freedom of our youth. Thank you for walking down this nostalgic road with me today. If these memories brought a warm smile to your face, please gently press the like button and subscribe to the channel so we can continue to share these precious moments together. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these lost rituals do you miss the most? Or, what is a completely normal thing you did as a child that would be totally illegal today? Please share your stories in the comments below. I look forward to reading every single one of them.